We are here for the February edition of the Slowdown, our monthly look at the world of slow cinema, which we are expanding every month, it
Mhm.
seems, into various corners of independent and art cinema. And we're here tonight with special guest Matt Zoller Seitz, and we also have Sujewa back joining us. So why are we all three of us here tonight? Not only to talk about Jean-Luc Godard's ALPHAVILLE, but also to talk about a film that the two of you are working on, Space Rabbit. Tell me about
Mhm.
Space Rabbit and how it might relate to ALPHAVILLE, because I've got a I'm seeing a connection or two.
I I watched Alphaville today. Space Rabbit is much better.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that. Well, Alphaville is actually finished, so I think you have to give the edge to Alphaville just for that reason alone. But yeah, Space Rabbit is something that it's almost become like this mythical thing that I've been working on my entire life. Like I actually storyboarded and wrote a script to this thing in 2008, and I've periodically tried to get it underway, and then life keeps interrupting it, and it's currently shelved. But I did shoot with Sujewa helped me put it together, a test sequence, and I have a feature-length screenplay that I wrote with Steven Santos, and I have storyboards and puppets. I have bins full of puppets in my basement, and I'm ready to go. But I got to get the time. It's really more a matter of time than money to put it together. I mean, but it's a story of an animal planet that is taken over by a fascist dictator squirrel who sees his power. He contrives a series of crises which he then solves. And each time he solves one of these crises that he created, he accumulates more power and eventually takes over the animal planet. So yeah, it's kind of a metaphor for various things, but weirdly not for Trump, because it was kind of like about the Bush administration and 9/11 and Iraq and all that stuff, but with puppets.
Well, the last time we tried to shoot it, Trump was in power, 2017.
Yeah, but certainly fascism is something that's not going away anytime soon. So unfortunately, I'm sure it won't be. Unfortunately, if human history teaches us anything, it's that stories about authoritarian governments are never going to be irrelevant. So but that's something I'm going to get to it. I'm going to get to it, and everybody's going to have a hearty laugh when I finally get this thing done. It's going to be incredible, and they're going to say, "I can't believe he actually did it. I just assumed it was never going to happen." That's what it's going to be. So,
well, there's a pandemic going on, so you can't do it now. So after the pandemic.
Well, actually, I can do it now. That's the beautiful thing is, with a project like this, I don't need a crew of 30 or 40 people to do this. Like, the original plan, like that, the short film that we made was, the production values were much, much higher than anything that I'd ever envisioned. Like what I envisioned was something like, rear projected backdrops, like probably freeze frames from classic science fiction films, and then you build miniature sets in front of it, and then you got the sock puppets going, "Hey, I'm a rabbit," and but it's in CinemaScope. Like it was like the low budget nature of it was part of the joke. It was the joke was supposed to be that it looked like if the land of make believe for Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood had been directed by Ridley Scott when he made Blade Runner.
Nice.
Like that's the idea. Is like it's supposed to be like staggeringly beautiful, and yet it's a bunch of sock puppets and Lego buildings for the city, things like that. So that's what it was always supposed to be, and I can do that. I've got plenty of room in the basement still. I just can move some boxes around. It'll be okay.
You can shoot it on your iPhone and edit it with on 2:35 ratio.
Well, I don't think I'd want to shoot it on the iPhone. I think I'd want to use a proper camera. Like the camera and the lenses are the only thing that I would really spend money on, and the rest of it, I think part of the challenge is to go to, like one of my rules would be the sets have to be built with materials that actually exist, like objects that actually exist. In other words, the city skyline, if you look closely at the city skyline, you're going to see like an air ionizer and a toaster turned on its side and a vacuum cleaner and things like that. And like that's part of the fun of it is going, oh, that skyscraper is really, a car detailing device or something like that. That's the fun of it. And like when you're down in tunnels with some animals that live underground, it's clearly paper mache, and it's obviously that's what it is, and that's charming. And I think there's a lot to be said for trying to put the focus on the imagination and the feel of something. And I'm a big believer in the idea that you don't need a lot of money to make a good movie. I mean, you need some money. Like when you get below a certain amount, and if you don't really have a mastery of picture and sound, then yeah, it can look and sound so amateurish that it's just impossible to compete in any meaningful way. But if you really know what you're doing, and if your ideas are good and the performances are good and the filmmaking is good, then the budget doesn't matter that much. Like if you look at something like Spike Lee's She's Gotta Have It, or Jim Jarmusch's Stranger Than Paradise, those were very cheap movies to make. The Coen brothers' first film, Blood Simple, Danny Boyle's Shallow Grave. I don't think there's ever been anybody, Breathless, Godard, since we're talking about him tonight. Nobody looks at Breathless and goes, gee, that would be better if they spent more money. No one has ever said that. You may like the movie or not like it, but it's not like you say, oh, what really would have put this movie over the top is $10 million. No.
Ian, you saw the 7-minute clip. What did you think?
I did. It was a great little appetizer, and I have so many questions.
Ask away.
Well, so first of all, let's go back to the beginning of this. Now, it's kind of a politically minded, motivated story, but what brought you, what compelled you to write a film about puppets? I mean, you're known as a film critic, right? So you're stepping into the arena of actually making a movie. What was the lightning, the spark moment? Like, I have to do this, and this is the project that's going to do it.
I mean, I've actually done it before. I mean, I back in a previous life, I was, first of all, I went to film school when I was in college, and I made short films, and I edited other people's movies. And then when I got to New York, about 15 years ago, Jesus, it's 20 now. I produced a low-budget crime thriller that shot in New Jersey, and then I wrote, directed, and edited my own feature film, which was called Home. And it was like a Robert Altman movie. It was all set in at one party in one house, and there were 24 characters and overlapping storylines and things like that.
I saw it.
Yeah, and I've made short films. I've written and directed short films with actors in them, and then I've made hundreds of hours of video essays about film and television history and style for various outlets, including the Elle magazine, which unfortunately is not operating anymore, but the Museum of the Moving Image website, they did a bunch of stuff for them, and Salon, I did probably 20 or 30 things for them. And I'm going to put all those out. I actually have the original files of those, and at some point I'm going to re-upload all of those to Vimeo. But a lot of the stuff I did for Press Play, many of which were done with Steven Santos, who's my filmmaking partner. Those are all on the Vimeo page for Press Play still. Stuff about television, stuff about movies. So I've been a filmmaker continuously at the same time that I've been a critic pretty much for 20 years. So this is just sort of like a kind of a escalation, I think you would say.
All right.
But I've also been, but I'm interested in, I love the Muppets. I love the Muppets. The Muppets and Looney Tunes are two of my passions. I absolutely adore both of those. And I always wanted to make something that was in the vein of the Muppets or Looney Tunes, because I don't think there's enough entertainment right now that hits that sweet spot where it's equally satisfying for adults and for children. Like for the children, there's funny voices and people, characters like falling down and running into things. And then for the adults, there's references to politics and popular culture and philosophy and all sorts of really outrageous puns and things that little kids aren't going to get. Like The Simpsons was probably the biggest example of something that pulled that off. And I think SpongeBob SquarePants did it. I love SpongeBob is, to me, like right up there with the Marx Brothers. But that's what this will be ultimately. But I'm going to build up to it.
So,
I think it's 3 years away. That's my prediction.
Good.
I think
Good.
it's 3 years away.
So 2024. So it'll be great. It'll be a politically themed film in what is sure to be another politically charged election year. That'll be great.
Well, it's that, but it's sort of like in the way that, like, like when Bugs Bunny pulls Hitler's pants down, like on that level. Like, it's not like I'm not going to be doing, it's not going to be like super sophisticated highbrow stuff here. Like, I've got like, I've got a sequence where my equivalent of the Jedi Knights in Star Wars are systematically executed by the bad guys, and like one of them gets a piano dropped on it, and it's a toy piano, but when it hits him, it makes the sound of an actual piano. I'm sorry, hold on a minute.
No problem.
That's my friend in Texas who is stranded.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
So this werewolf ninja philosopher, I thought it up while I was working as producer on Space Rabbit,
Okay. Now, what was the
2017.
right? So, what was the
Guys, let me just take a minute break
Sure.
here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
do
We'll
it.
talk.
Right back.
Yeah.
What was so you were working on Space Rabbit and you conceived Werewolf Ninja Philosopher. I think I might have known that, but I don't think I knew what was again, what was that light bulb moment where you
The
or-
lion reminded me of a werewolf a little bit.
okay.
Then I was like, and it was like I think the lion in Space Rabbit is a detective, and I was like, oh, how about a werewolf who's also a ninja, who's also a philosopher and a private detective?
Is there any possibility of a Space Rabbit, or at least the lion character crossover, an appearance in Werewolf Ninja Philosopher 2?
Could be. Anything is possible. And on the new movie, editing, almost done. The Secret Society for Slow Romance. Hopefully Wednesday or Thursday, I'll have it done.
Cool. Well, I'm looking forward to it, man. It's gonna be big, and we're set to talk about it soon. That's a teaser
on the
for all of you
21st.
out there.
Yeah.
So this coming weekend or next weekend, I've lost all track of time.
Yeah, it's like that during the pandemic era.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that movie is about two filmmakers who, and we could do an update on that while we wait for Matt.
Yeah.
And that movie is about two filmmakers who go on several dates and figure out how to end poverty worldwide.
Mhm.
We aim high.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds you're more directly tackling the issues of the day, but through humor and romance, than with puppets. Yeah.
That's right.
Hey, sorry
Hey,
about
Matt,
that. I
welcome
guess
back.
you're
No
gonna have to
problem.
you're gonna have to do an edit there or something. But yeah, that's a
No,
friend of mine.
we talked.
A friend of mine who's stuck in Dallas with no power in a hotel. Like, it's dark and there's no power and there's no heat.
Oh, so is it a good update? Is it hopeful? Like, hey, the generators are coming back on, or is it?
No, she's in a car. She's in her car right now with her son.
Oh, at least the car has heat.
Like with the heat. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's insanity. It's like something out of, like, stories. Like, these are the stories that they used to tell us when we were kids about what life was like in a communist country.
Right.
It's like when it gets cold,
The
they don't have any
breakdown.
heat or light. That's what communism is, kids. That's what we've got right now. Anyway, it's incredible.
Well, to go back to what we were talking about before you had to break away for a second. Yeah, you were talking about the toy piano falling on the Jedi stand-in puppet and making the actual piano falling sound.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a cool idea. I had mentioned that it was sort of a political movie coming out in another political election year, but the idea of it being kind of subversive in that it's not overtly about politics, but you can, if you're an adult, you can maybe get some of those things out of it. That, I think, is the best entertainment, rather than something that constantly hits you over the head with what it's trying to be or say, capital S say. So yeah, as far as the production of it, did you, for this 7-minute clip, there's quite a few puppets and like little sets and things going on. Have you built all of the puppets for this endeavor, or did you just?
Oh God, no, not all of them. Not
Okay.
all of them. I mean, we built a number of the principles for that segment, and then we shot another couple of scenes with some different characters, and but a lot of them are going to be basically, what they call kit bashing, where you take, existing stuffed animals and action figures and puppets and things, and you take the arms off of them, you put them on a different one, or you switch the heads, or you paint them different colors, or you add fur or something like that. Like we're going to be, like I've got a friend who has a collection of several hundred sock puppets and stuffed animals, and that's going to be like for the scenes where where the fascist dictator Squirrel is addressing the crowd. We're going to have like an epic Gone with the Wind style crane shot going over the heads of the crowd, and it's all going to be like puppets on sticks, and people will be doing this to make them move, like yay. And, it's not like we're not it's not ALM. You know what I mean? I mean, that's again, that's hopefully that's the charm of it, is like how ingenious can you be when you were just using literally objects from your house, from your garage, from your basement, things you got from the city dump, stuff like that. Like I am going to the city dump. I'm going to go to the city dump, and I'm going to rent an 18-foot panel truck, and I'm just going to load up with anything that looks futuristic that I find.
It's going to look good. It's going to be interesting.
Oh yeah, we're going to light it. It's going to look fantastic. I definitely want lens flares.
From
you
the old
can add
J.J.
those,
Abrams route, huh?
Oh, completely. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. I mean, people are going to see this and they're going to go, "Wow, that looks really good." And I'll say, "I told you."
That's why it's taking a long time.
Yes.
Now, as far as this interrogation scene, it sounds far less ambitious and peopled heavy than doing that giant, crane shot over the puppets. I assume that's why you chose that scene for the kind of the big production test.
Yeah, well, we rented a floor of, what was it, what kind of building?
Office building. I think it was an
office. It was like an office building in like Sunset Park or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Sunset Park.
Yeah, we had it was like 2,000 square feet. So it wasn't like we had Pinewood studios at our disposal. So we used, wide angle lenses to make everything look bigger than it actually was. And everything's built out of like, a plywood and paper mache, and we painted it and we added a little texture to make it look like concrete. I mean, it was nothing. It's kind of incredible what you can do with lighting and negative space, particularly like darkness is your friend and something like that.
Yeah, we had a great team. We had a great team, man.
And the sound, and I think the sound
that looks really good.
The sound and the sound really helps a lot. Sound is the low budget filmmaker's friend.
So
Sujewa, how did you get, and Matt, how did you guys come together to work on this? You're listed as a producer on this, Sujewa.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we kept in touch after I reviewed Matt's movie. We knew each other from the internet. It's a thing that's popular back in the day.
And we kept running into each other on the subway.
That's right. We lived in the same neighborhood.
Yeah.
And that's why everyone should move to New York to help your filmmaking career. So, yeah, we raised some money on Indiegogo, and the project was a big undertaking as an indie film thing. We had a floor, we had a great team, put together the sets, and I think we have some behind the scenes footage in that Indiegogo pitch video.
Well, and we had the puppeteers were professional puppeteers. They were people who had worked for the Jim Henson Company, which is that's as good as it gets. I mean, these were real puppeteers. These were not like me and my friends. These were people who actually knew what they were doing. And that's why the physical performances are good, is because they were people who knew what they were doing. So just like if you're, like you want to hire professional actors for live action stuff, it's the same thing with puppetry and animation. You want people who are good at it. So,
And we had a great DP, Daniel Guillermo.
Mm-hmm.
And you can link to the segment. To the Vimeo clip. And also, if that pitch video might still be up on Vimeo. That has
it's still up.
Yeah. That has some behind the scenes footage.
So as far as that goes, I mean, you shot this like 4 years ago almost.
2017. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So when it comes to this 3-year plan of getting it done and then released in 2024, are you going to be able to retain the same talent? I mean, it's got to be kind of like, was it Richard
No.
Linklater making
Different team.
Boyhood, like having to go back and try and make sure
There might
everyone's
be
available.
there might be a few there might be a few of the same people who work on it, but it's not, you know, it's not that kind of a project. It's I mean, you know, the way it's going to be put together is the entire movie is going to be done as an animatic first. Like every shot's going to be planned out as an animatic, and I'm going to with hand-drawn storyboards, and I'm going to be, you know, animating it by just sort of panning and zooming within the storyboards.
Oh yeah.
And then, you know, and then a kind of a rudimentary sound design, and I'll probably do most of the voices myself, and I might have a few people helping me with that. And then you just go through and you do each shot. You're literally just going shot by shot through the thing, and you're shooting shots and you're dropping them into the timeline. Like the entire movie has to be finished and locked. And then you're doing the last part of it is the visuals. So it's kind of, in a way, it's almost like you're flipping the normal production process of a live action film.
And it's going to be feature like 80, 90 minutes.
I mean, you know, it's probably going to be much longer than that. It's
At
probably
one
going to be
point-
much longer. I'm not even kidding. I mean, I'm just going to be honest. There's no way this is going to be a 90-minute movie. I've been thinking about it since 2008. I'll be lucky if it's shorter than Lawrence of Arabia.
At one point, Matt wanted to make it a TV show.
Yeah. Well, and that's still possible. And I almost see it as being like, you know, 2 films with an intermission in the middle. And at the end of part 1, all hope seems lost. Like one of those.
And I assume then
It
the
could be a
idea is,
3-part miniseries.
well, there you go. Or, you know, just think trilogy.
An epic trilogy.
Yeah.
I don't think there's enough there for a trilogy, but there may be enough there for 2 like reasonable length movies, you know.
Or you could do the
but-
Zack Snyder route and just chop your movie up into 6 episodes or whatever they're doing on HBO Max with the Snyder cut.
I don't think that's what they're doing anymore. I think.
Oh, did
I
they
think
change
that
it again?
I think they toyed with that idea, and I think they decided to just go ahead and do it as one. My understanding is that it's one long movie now.
I think it's a one long movie now.
Okay. I don't know
Which
when
is,
that
you know-
happened, because I swear a month ago they were still talking about this episodic thing, but I don't know.
I don't know, but I mean, I had read comments where Zack Snyder had said it's a movie, and I have no reason to doubt that. And it's streaming, you know, it's not like it's not like it's Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet where it's 4 hours long and there's an intermission, and, you know, you have to plan where you're going to go to see it. You know, people could watch 30 minutes of it at a time if they want to.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess then the idea is hopefully things will be back to some semblance of normal, and there will still be venues at which to project movies in 2024. So I'm assuming festivals, theatrical run, you got the whole thing planned, or?
I hope so. I mean, I even have this idea that I don't know if this is actually going to work, because who knows what the future is going to hold. But my fantasy is that I take it around the country and I only show it in theaters.
Space
Good
Rabbit
idea.
Roadshow, do the Tarantino thing.
Yeah, or like, you know, back in the day, what they did with, you know, movies like, you know, Lawrence of Arabia, 2001, you know, Hello Dolly, you know, all of those big roadshow films, The Sound of Music, you know, and you go see Space Rabbit, and it'll probably be at like, you know, a decrepit mall somewhere where there's like one Orange Julius left. Or the basement of a church. I could see the basement of a church maybe, or like an elementary school or something like that. I would love that. I think it would be great.
Unless Netflix says, here's a bunch of money, Matt, give us that movie.
Oh yeah, sure. Obviously, if somebody wants to, you know, like to quote my father, you know, I would be perfectly happy to sell out, but nobody's asked me.
When you said that thing about the roadshow, I immediately pictured a marquee with Space Rabbit and Spinal Tap. But you know, that's maybe.
I think, or maybe it could be. I was thinking, or it could be Space Rabbit and Alphaville.
Or Space Rabbit and Dune, both Dunes.
Yeah. Although if it was my version of Dune, it would be Doon. Dune.
Right, Dune.
Dune. And it'd be a guy, and the character's name would be Dune, like Fred Dune.
The first review of the new Dune should be by David Lynch, saying, "This is all right, but I did this."
I mean, what is the sandworm but a sock puppet anyway?
That's right.
Wouldn't it be great if you're there, you've been waiting years to see, the new, $400 million version of Dune. And when the sandworm finally comes up out of the desert, it's it's an athletic sock. It's just an athletic sock with a stripe on it. It's like, hey, I'm a sandworm. People would be so angry. So incredibly angry.
Well, at this point, they'll just be watching it on their TVs anyway, so they'll be yelling in their living rooms.
Yeah.
But all right, so I think this is a good way to transition into Alphaville, since Matt, you name checked Alphaville in your mystical marquee idea, which I wholeheartedly endorse. It's weird, the synergies. I watched the Space Rabbit short yesterday. I watched Alphaville today over several viewings because I was in the hospital with my wife who was doing minor surgery, so I was watching it in like these 10-minute chunks. Everything's fine, but I was also reading the last couple of weeks Alan Moore's V for Vendetta, which they turned into a film a number of years ago. They have a lot of similarities. The Space Rabbit thing. Yeah, there's like this detective, kind of a hard-boiled guy who's being roughed up by the authorities and being a real kind of smartass about it. That's definitely the case in Alphaville. I am not, and Sujewa knows this intimately. I think I've seen one other Godard film, and it was I'm blanking on the name. It was the one that he did a few years ago. It was all montage.
Goodbye to Language.
Goodbye to Language, yes, which I remember digging, but this is my first real foray into Jean-Luc Godard, which I would say is an embarrassment because I'm 43 years old. But as with a lot of these cinematic educational journeys that we've been on together, I'm finding I'm getting a whole new life in film at this late stage and discovering things. I'm giddy as a teenager. I loved Alphaville so much. I rented it on Amazon, and then halfway through the movie, I paused it on Amazon and went and bought the Blu-ray from Amazon. So I will own it very soon.
Yeah. So Godard owes us a few dollars, me and Matt, for that sale.
There you go.
Yes.
But
he owes us each a franc.
That's right.
One franc.
Are they still on francs?
They don't have francs anymore.
Yeah, I was gonna. They're on the euro, right?
I think there's no francs anymore, unfortunately. Although I bet Godard strikes me as the kind of guy who still insists. He still probably pays in francs for things.
That's right.
He gets mad when people won't take them.
Yeah, no, the late 40s are the new 12, so it's a good time to discover Godard.
Yeah.
Or the mid 40s, whatever you're in.
Early 40s.
Early 40s.
Yeah. I'll give myself that grace.
40s.
So tell me, you guys, about your history with Jean-Luc Godard, because I'm discovering him way late. I assume the two of you discovered him in film school or earlier. Or, how did you discover him? What did you make of him the first time you watched his films?
Matt's written about him, so let's have him go first.
Oh, I think probably the first Godard film I saw was Breathless. I was in high school. It was on VHS, and it was a friend of mine in high school who was by far the greater of the two of us when it comes to film knowledge. Like, he introduced me to a lot of things, and we had watched Taxi Driver and Mean Streets. We were watching a lot of Scorsese, and he was telling me, a lot of Scorsese's style comes from Godard, and the editing and the camera work. And in fact, if you watch early Godard, particularly like the first maybe 10, 15 years, you can totally see it. Like, the way that Scorsese's camera moves is very, very much influenced. It's obvious, and it's very kinetic, but it's not like wild and messy. Like, it's very deliberate, like where it is and then why it decides to move and where it moves and how long it takes. Like, all of that stuff is very, very meticulously choreographed, while still feeling spontaneous. And there's a lot of but the editing is very playful and very surprising. And there are a lot of text that is cut into the images, often in kind of provocative ways. Like, you kind of don't know why they're doing it. You mentioned Goodbye to Language, which is one of my favorite of the recent Godard films. And of course, he's somebody who's always been interested in language and in the meaning and function of language. And Alphaville could also be called Goodbye to Language.
Yes.
It's very much a movie that's about the control of human emotion and human thought, literally by removing our accessibility to certain words. Like there are certain words that are no longer in use or no longer permitted. And this idea that words are the things that allow us to understand our emotions and our thoughts uh, is something that's very, very important to him. And I have to say, the thing that jumped out to me the most about Alphaville, which, for the benefit of people who haven't seen it, it's the story of this private detective named Lemmy Caution, played by Eddie Constantine, who is actually a character who appeared a lot of other places, and they kind of Godard kind of just dropped him into this science fiction story, but he's more of a traditional, like a Mike Hammer sort of character. But he's supposed to be a creature of emotion and instinct, and he's dropped into this world that's pure logic. So it's kind of like Captain Kirk in the world of the Vulcans, almost, or they're almost kind of like, they were like robots. Like the first time I saw this movie, I thought, oh, they're all robots, but they're actually not robots. They're just people who have been sort of conditioned so that they seem like machines. Like there's something machine-like about them. And this movie was released in 1965, and you remember, it's hard for us to process this now because so much time has elapsed. But 1965 is 20 years away from the detonation of the first atom bomb. Hiroshima and Nagasaki happened exactly 20 years before. So imagine now, like I'm 52, that would be the equivalent if it happened when I was 32. So, it's something that feels as present to us as 9/11, which happened exactly 20 years ago, almost. We're coming up on the 20th this year. So we're talking about, like, it's as close to us emotionally and psychologically as the first use of the atomic bomb, and the only use so far in war was. And what happened was the use of the atomic bomb, the creation and use of the atomic bomb against human beings, and at the same time a mechanized Holocaust, a genocide, perpetrated against Jews and other enemies of the German Empire. All of that was happening at the same time. So there was and then before that, World War I had sort of provoked similar feelings of, can humankind survive? Has science can science be used for anything except evil and destruction? Is science going to be used only for control? There was a great faith in science at the time in the post-war period, but also great fear of science, fear that it was going to condition us and turn us into machines. And remember, the Industrial Revolution had hit kind of a peak in the 20s and 30s and 40s, and we're still carrying into that period. Like after World War II, the reason why the Western powers prevailed in World War II is because they had mastered industry. We were able to produce incredible numbers of war machines very quickly and just overwhelm the Axis powers. It was really a building competition. And so we come out of that and we're swaggering, and we've got this incredible industrial might. We're producing cars and prefabricated homes and refrigerators, and we've got major broadcast television networks and radio networks that are constantly propagandizing people and saying, buy more stuff, buy a new house, buy a new car with tail fins, all of that kind of stuff. Buy new clothes, everything, buy. There were an interstate highway system was created that Eisenhower really spearheaded. And one of the ways that he got people to pay for this massive project was telling them that it was for defense. And that's often how we get things done in this country that are for the good of the entire society. The only way we can convince people to spend money on things is telling them that it's for defense, by which we mean war. So there's all of this stuff that's going on where it's like war, industrialization, machine technology, and then the computer. And it's so crazy to see now what computers looked like back then. They were huge. They were based on tape, magnetic tape. There were spools of magnetic tape, and the computing power that I carry around in this, this thing is as powerful as the computer that successfully landed astronauts on the moon in 1969. That's how much the technology has become compact. But we had computers. We had surveillance technology, we had videotape surveillance, we had audio surveillance. We had, it was punch cards and magnetic tape, but there was already talk about computers regimenting and controlling every aspect of society. and they told us that this was going to be so that they could give us more freedom, that they could free us up, and we could have a life of leisure and a life of love, a life of the mind, and we could just kick it and enjoy our friends and our families. And that's kind of not what happened. And all of this is happening like within Alphaville. This fear of these changes that are taking place, like what does it mean? And the anxiety, the unease, the feeling that all of this is ultimately going to lead us in a very bad direction is, I think, what makes the movie feel still like, I think it's a really overwhelmingly powerful movie. And there's something about it it feels like a David Lynch movie to me now. Like it feels like I'm watching Mulholland Drive or Lost Highway or something. Like it feels like I'm having a nightmare when I watch it, and it doesn't feel dated to me at all. It feels like that movie. Do you ever see that movie Dark City?
Oh yeah, yeah.
It feels like Dark City or like The Matrix. Like there's certain aspects of those. Like there's a kind of a sci-fi noir like subcategory that I think Alphaville kind of invented. Like I don't think Blade Runner would exist without Alphaville.
No, and the thing that struck me about it is very much sci-fi, but it's deceptively so. When we see the voice, or when we see the computer Alpha 60, which I guess to further set this up, Lemmy Caution is an agent who's sent to Alphaville, which we're meant to believe is a sort of space city in another part of a galaxy. There are other planets. It's sort of an interstellar kind of a deal going on. So he's sent there. He sticks out like a sore thumb, and he sort of gets caught up in this. There's a line saying that he's been in Alphaville a day, but it feels like an eternity or something like that, because he just can't stand being around this lack of humanity. But to watch the film, aside from when we see Alpha 60, who, to what you were talking about with Space Rabbit and these found objects as the environment, Alpha 60, the representation looks like a car engine fan with a light behind it, behind mattress springs almost.
Yes.
Even, and with a giant shining light that is definitely the precursor to HAL from 2001.
Absolutely.
But to look at this, you can kind of tell what it is, but that doesn't make it any less creepy. It makes it look even more magnificent. But the rest of it, you don't see flying cars and people with crazy, silver suits and space bubble helmets. It just looks like what I imagine contemporary 1965 kind of upper class France, but it's all in the storytelling. You can say it's a completely degraded society, but for the narrative that they're trying to tell, this society that's being controlled by Alpha 60 has gotten rid of art. People don't understand what love or consciousness is. And so without those building blocks, you can't, by definition, have art. Everything is very utilitarian. So yeah, this could be 300 years in the future if they outlaw everything that gives, architecture, I think I just invented a word, and fashion, like, and art. It gives it its soul. Everything would just be kind of gray and mundane and frozen in time. So that's sort of the genius of it. I put it right up there with the experience, the intensity of watching a Blade Runner, the intensity of watching Dark City, but with the aesthetics of this could just be like an episode of Mad Men if it was shot in 1965.
Right, or Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
It could also be a commentary at the time of communist states outlawing religion, and there's all the fictional world in Alphaville seems to have a mixture of like hyper capitalism, extreme faith in science, also the communist desire to remove people from religion and families.
And also misogyny seems to have been commercialized. The women have these tattoos. They have these numeric tattoos on their skin, and the men look ill. They don't look healthy. There's very few healthy looking men in this. It almost looks like there's some kind of eugenics going on. It's really very kind of unsettling. And then there's that talk about that one guy who's going with that prostitute. I think they're in a brothel. And somebody asked him, "Are you going to kill yourself?" And he's like, "No. But apparently this is a thing that people do."
Right.
They just kill themselves. And they say, oh yeah, this was something that was perfected in China. And they don't really elaborate on that, which is also very creepy. But they don't, and I think that's something that is a technique, a storytelling technique that is not properly appreciated and used. And I think it's because people lack the nerve to do it, which is to not explain everything. To give us the tip of the iceberg, like you give us a little fact and you go, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what that's about. And they don't give you any more. And then it stays in your head and now you're obsessed with it. And I think, I hate when I'm watching a science fiction movie and it's filled with these really evocative images and ideas, and my imagination starts to really percolate, and then you get to the last 30 minutes of it and they explain everything, and the explanation is not as interesting as whatever you were thinking of. And it's better not to explain. And there's very few science fiction movies that have the discipline not to explain. Like 2001 is one of the rare ones, and I think Close Encounters is another one. Alphaville pulls off a neat trick because it's constantly seeming to explain things to you, and yet nothing ever really makes sense.
Right.
Alphaville reminded me. Go ahead. Alphaville reminded me a little bit of a Man in the High Castle. How they used 1960s, 1940s, but it was a interdimensional sci-fi story.
Well, as far as the that not explaining, I'm there with you. I like a healthy dose of ambiguity, especially my science fiction. But something, you used the word obsessed, Matt, when you were talking about this. There is a scene where Lemmy is following Natasha, who's this she's a lady that he meets there. She's apparently the daughter of the person that he was sent there to find. A guy
Dr.
named
von Braun, which is interesting because that's the that was the German scientist who was a mastermind of the rocketry program. There's a lot of references to people who were involved in war, in World War II, and in nuclear science and in science generally. Like they just throw their last names into the stew.
Well, yeah, and the only real art, I think we see one painting that is not E equals MC square. That's that's their definition of art. You see the neon sign, you see that guy, I think who was the ambassador, the guy that died in the brothel. He had it in his locker. He had an E equals MC square poster. So Natasha is the daughter of von Braun, but Lemmy is sent to Alphaville to find Dr. Nosferatu, who we're told no longer exists and has sort of become Dr. von Braun as an agent, the master agent of Alpha 60. It's interesting because he's named Dr. Nosferatu. When Lemmy is talking to Natasha, I think he mentions that she has small pointy teeth like those vampires in movies that they used to show. Yes, but not even related to Dr. Nosferatu, literally. But he follows her to this. It's like a YMCA. There's a swimming pool sequence that is one of the most shocking, horrifying things I've ever seen in a film. It's not bloody, but it's just so imaginative in its cruelty. You've got men lined up, and I think it's like 50 men to one woman, but I don't think we actually see any women. They're all lined up.
That's the rate of executions. They say that they're executing 50 men for one woman.
Yes, these are the dissidents. These are the people that slip up and show emotion. There's a man who's being executed because he cried when his wife passed away. This your idea of planet Vulcan is very apropos, getting rid of all visible signs of emotion, but they're being lined up one at a time, shot in by firing squad and Uzi into a swimming pool, and then you've got these like showgirl diving women parading into the pool after them.
And like it's a water ballet, like an Esther Williams water ballet from a Busby Berkeley film. They dive in. And weirdly, there's one guy who gets shot and he falls in and he's not dead yet. And I can't exactly tell what's going on, but it looks like maybe they're finishing the job in the water.
I think that's. Did they have knives?
Yeah.
Oh, I missed that detail. But yeah, they all kind of converge on him. It's terrifying, but it just shows this imagination. Like all creativity is gone except for when it comes to ways to execute people, apparently.
Well, that's the quote though. It's you imagine the future and it's a boot stamping on the human face forever. That's what a lot of this is about. And and I have to say, I think it's important when anytime Godard is discussed to acknowledge the fact that he is in a lot of ways full of shit. Like he is a bit of a bullshit artist, Godard. Like he said, his control of language and sound and image is so masterful that sometimes I think he dazzles you into thinking there's a bit more I don't know how to put it, but like he seems like maybe he's got it all figured out, but I don't think he really does. But I think that makes his movies more interesting in a way, because he's sort of angrily babbling at you with his filmmaking, like Dennis Hopper's character in Apocalypse Now when they get to the compound. Like that's what I feel like when I'm watching a Godard film. Is like it's a brilliant maniac babbling at me for an hour and a half to 2 hours, and like it's this stream of images, and it's very free associative, and it's become even more. He's one of the few filmmakers who's gotten more stylistically radical as he got older. Like I think like if you watch the last 4 or 5 movies that he's done, he's like it is almost impenetrable compared to something like ALPHAVILLE.
Well,
It's like very, very unusual for a filmmaker to become more radical in that way.
Well, I was going to say,
I like the later
almost,
movies.
well, it reminds me, and Terrence Malick is another filmmaker who I'm just sort of discovering, but I watched, I think, 3 of his more recent films in the last 5 years as my first exposure to him. And I was like, what is the deal with this guy? Everyone's carrying on about him. But then I watched Badlands and I'm like, oh, now I understand. I should have started there.
Yeah.
But talking about getting away from that original form. Yeah.
He was pushing himself. And I think that, remember, this is a guy, Malick, actually, Malick and Godard have a lot in common, I think, not in terms of the feel of their movies, but just the way that they use cinema language. But something happened with Malick, which is he went increasingly, he had that 20-year gap between his second film and his third film. And then it was another 7 years until he made The New World. And then another, I think, 7 years before he made 6 years when he made Tree of Life. And then suddenly this burst of creativity, and I think work going to digital really liberated him. And there was a period where there were so many Malick films going on that people couldn't even keep track of how many there were, or what he was shooting, like what piece was going to end up in which film. And you were hearing these reports coming out of Austin that's like, Michael Fassbender is in the new Malick film, and with Ryan Gosling and Christian Bale, and it's like, well, Christian Bale isn't in that one; he's in a different one. But they were all there at the same time. Like he's shooting one continuous movie, and he's deciding like which pieces to put in which film. But very much like Godard in that Malick is, I believe, if he's not 80 yet, he's very close.
Godard is almost 100, I think, 95 or something.
Right? God. Yeah, absolutely. And he is. Oh my God. Wow, still going. Like he's like a Clint Eastwood. Like Eastwood, I'm sure if Eastwood doesn't die on the set, I will be surprised.
Godard said,
very surprised.
Godard said he has a bunch of movies that he almost works on movies every day, because now he does film essays. So even after he passes on, there might be like 10 more movies that are.
Well, he's going to be like Prince. He's going to be like Prince.
Right.
There's 500 albums in the vault. Yeah, completely. But what I was going to say about Malick was, I don't know if have you seen his most recent movie, A Hidden Life?
I haven't.
No, I've not.
Okay, so I highly recommend that movie, because I feel like what happened was Malick went off in these increasingly experimental directions with his filmmaking, like very much parallel to what Godard was doing during the same period. Like it got to the point where it was, even if you loved his movies, they were a bit much. They were a bit much, really. And I love him. Like he's one of my very favorite directors. But the Song to Song was the one where I was like, I'm out. I love you, but I'm out. But A Hidden Life, it feels like all of the stuff he was doing in that period, from The Thin Red Line up through Night of Cups and Song to Song, that radicalism is in there, but also the traditionalism of something like Badlands and Days of Heaven. Like there's a lot of long self-contained scenes that have proper beginnings, middle, and ends. And then there will be these kind of montages that are quick cuts and moving camera and things. And then he'll go back to the traditional method. So I feel like I think it's his greatest film. I really do.
Wow. All right.
Yeah, I do. And I'm a person who, it's been very hard for me to choose. And it's still, Days of Heaven and The New World are probably the top 2 for me. But I think The Hidden Life I think that might be the one. I really think that might be the one.
sterling recommendation there. I gotta say, on Night of Cups, that was one of the films that I watched when people told me to watch Terrence Malick, and I hated it, but I watched it, I think, late last year after having discovered slow cinema with Sujewa over the course of the last year plus, and something clicked for me. I had understood a new kind of language with which to appreciate those kinds of movies. So now I have to go back and watch, Song to Song was one of the other ones that I saw, and I liked that even less than Night of Cups when I first saw it. So I'll get back to
I think it's
that.
the B side.
Hmm?
I think if it's an album, I think if it was a single, like, it's the B side. I think it's the B side. Night of Cups is the A side, and that's the B side. I think there's nothing nothing in that movie. I think it's doing a lot of the same things as Night of Cups, but not as interestingly. I love Night of Cups, even though, I mean, people say things like, well, the movie's not perfect, but, and it's like, well, I don't know what movie really is. There might be a few, but I kind of don't care. I just want the movie to be interesting all the way through. I don't need it to be perfect. And to me, like, demanding perfection from a movie, it pushes you perilously close to the world pictured in Alphaville. Like, are we measuring this movie with calipers? Like really? Come on, let's not do this.
We're discussing Tree of Life in a couple of months.
Yes.
Tree of Life is an interesting one, and that's one where I feel like, I
haven't seen
I do think it's an incredible film. It's not one of my favorite Malicks. I love it. I respect it. It made me feel things, but I don't. There's like 5 or 6 Malick movies that I like more than that. And I think Tree of Life is. I think there's a much longer version of that film somewhere. I think there's a 6-hour version of that film.
Because I know I
To me,
think
it
Criterion put out
feels-
like a 4-hour version like in the last couple of years, right?
I haven't seen that.
Yeah,
But it wouldn't surprise me. But I just don't think, like, even that, you like the creation sequence, that in itself, of course, a version of that was released that was like, what was it, 70 minutes or something? They put it out in IMAX.
I hadn't heard that.
Who narrated it? Was it Brad Pitt who narrated it? I can't remember.
Oh, I haven't seen it since it came out, and that was 10 years. Oh my God, 10 years ago.
Well, and he made the New World was originally released. There was a 150-minute cut, which I saw and loved, and then he recut it. He took 15 minutes out, and the 135-minute cut is the version that most people have seen. And I think it's probably my favorite of the cuts. I think it's all things to all people, or close to it. But the 3-hour cut is really interesting because it's got a lot of the same material as the other two, and all of this stuff you haven't seen before, but it's arranged differently, and it's done like. It's like you're reading a novel, and there's chapter titles, and it seems to me anyway to be more clearly broken into. There's the Koryanka Kilcher story, there's the Colin Farrell story, and then there's the merger of everybody's stories at the end. And it's fascinating to me, just from a filmmaking standpoint, how filmmakers can theoretically construct an infinite number of movies from the same material.
Let me ask you, just before we get back to Alphaville, I want to ask you about this specific point, because I'm always very curious. When it comes to a situation where you have a director who, as you're saying, makes different movies out of the same material, say, let's take maybe Blade Runner as an example, where there's like 5 or 6 different cuts. When you go back to compare them, do you make an effort to watch each subsequent version when a new one comes out, or do you just allow yourself to that breathing time? It's been 10 years, but I don't need to sit through a 3-hour epic to appreciate the 5-hour version.
Right. I don't know. It depends on the movie. Honestly, there aren't a whole lot of movies that I've done that with, because I kind of feel like, as interested as I am in the movies that I already know I like, I'm more interested in the movies that I haven't seen yet. So there have been a lot of instances where I hear, oh, there's a 3.5-hour cut of this movie that was originally 2 hours and 15 minutes. And I'm like, that's interesting, but I don't want to see it. And I'm not begrudging anybody who does want to see it. I totally get it. But, and also there's certain directors who I adore, but it's like Michael Mann, like, no, I'm done with you. I'm done with you. We don't need 6 cuts of everything. I'm still kind of angry at him that I can't see the original theatrical cut of Last of the Mohicans. I think each cut, I think every version of Last of the Mohicans is great, but that first cut was perfect, and I wish he'd left it alone. And there's a lot of directors who I feel like they mess things up when they go back to it. Like Francis Ford Coppola, The Outsiders, I think, is one of his great films. I think it's a perfect film. I don't think it was appreciated as much when it came out as it should have been. And then he went back and he recut it and he made it, The Outsiders, a novel for television or something like that. And he took out the orchestral music and he replaced it with rock and roll. And it was like, I don't know how long it was. The original was like 1 hour and 40 minutes. It was very tight. And this one, I don't know how long it was. It felt like it was 8 days long. It was awful, awful, very, very bad. And, George Lucas, oh my God, don't even get me started on George Lucas.
Well, maybe
those new special effects that he added for the re-release like 20 some years ago are awful. They're awful. They were bad. Like even when you were seeing them, they were bad.
Maybe Disney will buy right to the Terrence Malick world, and there'll be a Terrence Malick world and a whole bunch of shows, wheat fields you can walk in.
The extended Malick verse.
That's
my
right.
God.
11
Terryverse.
11 Malick shows coming out. I discovered Godard in film school, and it's a mixed feeling, just as Matt says. It feels like he's kind of bored with cinema. He's just messing around. Like even Alphaville, you're like, wow, all of that stuff could have been shot much more smoothly. Editing could be much better, blah, blah, blah. So it almost feels like a guy who's bored with cinema. But, there are brilliant moments. And he's kind of like not entertainment. He's kind of like, film theorist that you watch sometimes, because he puts out interesting stuff. But I like his later movies, like Goodbye to Language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting you should say that, because I agree. I think he was bored with cinema almost immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Almost immediately, but I don't know about bored. I think I would say frustrated. I think that he could not get cinema to do what he wanted it to do, whatever that was. But I think the frustration comes through in the filmmaking, and that's what makes him so interesting, and that's what makes his movies still very vital to me. And just the way that he will, even something like Alphaville, which is a comparatively early film for him, there are these moments where I was sitting there watching it again at home, and there's a long sequence where Lemmy Caution and Natasha are walking down a hallway. There's a lot of very long takes, and it's ambient sound. It's obviously the sound that they're getting from the boom that they're following with. And then at some point, the sound drops out completely. And there's a solid probably 45 seconds with no sound at all. And I thought, is there something wrong with my television? What's going on? Is there internet issues? Nope, that's just the way Godard did it. And I love that he'll cut. Sometimes he'll cut, like, he doesn't wait for what feels like the appropriate ending of a scene. He'll cut like in the middle of somebody's sentence. He'll just go bam, and it's over. and he'll cut to a car going down the street or a close-up of a bulb or something. And even this is 1965, like even then he's disrupting you and keeping you off balance. And Scorsese still does that. And there's a moment in Mean Streets where Harvey Keitel is hanging out with his girlfriend after they've just had sex, and she's walking around like putting her clothes on, and he's lying on the bed in his underwear, and he holds up his finger like a gun and points it, and you hear an actual gunshot. And the cut occurs right when he does his thumb like this, and you hear the sound carries over into the next shot. And it's so weird.
Mm-hmm.
It's so completely weird. Like, why would anybody do that in a movie? Not that we want everything to be rational, because that would be boring, but there's no earthly reason for something like that, except that they thought it was cool.
Yeah, he's not a poetic filmmaker in the sense like Malick is.
I think he is in his own way.
Yeah, in his own way, more of like disruptive poetry.
Well, and of course, he uses in Casino, he uses music from Godard's Contempt.
I mean, Godard is not poetic.
Oh,
like
no.
Malick.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah,
I misunderstood you.
No,
yeah.
Scorsese is poetic, obviously.
I think I've only seen 2 Godard films, and one of them was, Goodbye to Language.
You didn't like that one?
No, I don't remember much about it, though. I'd have to go back and watch it again. But as far as My experience with Alphaville, when I first pressed play, I thought I was in for a rough afternoon because it's the voiceover of Alpha 60. It's presented without context. You don't know what you're listening to or why you're listening to this very weird voice. It almost sounds like bad acting. It's like a hard-boiled mechanical voiceover in French, but you come to realize through the course of the film that it's actually very brilliant. And by the time the movie came to its conclusion, I was listening to these Alpha 60 voiceovers and noticing the almost like a scraping sound between sentences to really get that odd,
Yeah.
it's a human voice, but it's almost like it's being etched onto a record as it's being spoken or something.
Yeah, it's someone with a voice box.
Right. I read about
some sort
that.
of a voice issue. Yeah.
Yeah, and I read about that after doing some quick wikiing before we jumped on here. I was like, my God, that's perfect. But in terms of my first impression of it, yeah, the audio is not pristine like we're used to seeing in modern films or even necessarily films of the period. It just seemed like someone grabbed a camera and some friends and some nice suits and started following them around to make up this story. But it's revealed as being a much more sophisticated picture. And I think the poetry lies in that seduction of, if you stick with this long enough, we're going to blow your mind with this story and what's going on with these characters. Lemmy Caution as a character and Constantine as an actor, on the surface, he's a cliche, a cartoon of the hard-boiled detective in the trench coat. He's supposed to be the passionate human being character, but you almost get the feeling that just being in the atmosphere of Alphaville, he's sort of becoming one of them. And there's this internal struggle that's not necessarily manifesting on the surface to keep from becoming a robot. I'm thinking of the Borg from Star Trek, which came, several decades after this, and being an early seed of that. There's so many seeds in Alphaville that as a fan of pop culture, I don't know how I've gone this long without seeing this film. And now I just want to share it with everyone, which is why we're talking about it here.
Blade Runner almost feels like it's flipping it in a way. Like it's, the whole premise of Blade Runner and 2001 to a degree is that the machines are the ones with the feelings in those movies. And at the time the 2001 came out, one of the complaints, and it was surprisingly widespread, was none of the humans in this movie seem to have much life in them. The most fully rounded character is a computer. And the next question that I think a person should ask themselves is, do you think possibly that's on purpose? Do you think that might be on purpose? Do you think that might be, as they say, what do they say?
That was the point.
A feature, not a bug.
Yes.
And Blade Runner, I think, carries that up to the next level. Like, 14 years after 2001, Harrison Ford, that's hugely influenced by Alphaville. Harrison Ford even has the trench coat, but Harrison Ford is the hard-boiled, cold-blooded killer of these robots who are actually filled with passion and filled with joy of life. They want to extend their lifespans.
Imagine Columbo in Alphaville. Wouldn't that be funny?
Yeah. Actually, the other thing I thought of was Westworld. The HBO version of Westworld. I think they've seen Alphaville more than once.
Quick question: have you guys read the novel 2001 by Arthur C. Clarke?
I have it.
I read it in Sinhala.
I have it. I actually have a copy, a 1968 hardcover.
Okay, don't read that version. Keep it in the dust jacket on the shelf, but buy yourself a paperback. The novel is, I think, on par with the film, although it's very different. You get a sense for, they actually kind of explain why Bowman and Poole are that mechanical, but it's not a hand-holding kind of it makes sense to the story. Plus, the entire Dawn of Man sequence is told sort of from the perspective of these apes. Discovering
Moon
things.
Watcher and everybody, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. Go ahead.
I read it so long ago I don't remember, but I'll have to read it again.
Yeah, it's one of those, because I know Clarke and Kubrick kind of wrote these in conjunction, while they were working on the film. But it's amazing that you can have two pieces of art that are linked, but have very different points of view in getting to the same story. But yeah, so any closing thoughts on Alphaville? I mean, there's so much that we could break into this, but that could go on for like 6 hours. I think we've tickled the curiosity of anyone out there who, like me, up until today has not seen this film and should definitely seek it out.
Yeah, one thought I have as an indie filmmaker, great use of existing location and stuff to create a new world, and that aspect should be taught in film schools. Here's something you can just shoot things that exist in a certain way, and it could be a new world.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of really good, really interesting, low budget science fiction being made right now. I've seen some very, very good movies, like several. Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead are, I think they're 4 or 5 movies into their careers now, and their most recent film is Synchronic, which I liked a lot, although not as much as I liked the previous 2 films. But they're really, really working in that vein. And I just saw a movie called it's got a. It's not an obvious name. Let me hold on a second. Let me look it up here.
Is it the one with Anthony Mackie?
No. Well, no. Synchronic was the one with Anthony Mackie. This was this was a movie that just came out. Lapsus. That's the name of it. Lapsus
I heard
just
about it.
came out, which is about work. It's sort of almost like the Ken Loach movie, Sorry We Missed You, or Repo Man, or Office Space, like that kind of a thing. But you would like it. It's very much in the it's made in kind of the same philosophy as Alphaville. Like, it's all shot in New York and upstate in a park, a national park, and it's all using the existing locations. And there are a few props, a few kind of science fiction sort of props, and that's really all they need. And they do a lot with sound, and they do a lot with suggestion. And I don't know how much it costs to make that movie. It can't have been very expensive, but it doesn't matter. And I think it's a great inspiration to see movies like this. And in fact, most of the science fiction movies that I've seen in recent years that really captured my imagination have been low budget. A lot of the big budget ones I've not been as excited about as some other people. And I think in a lot of cases, money is the enemy of imagination. Not always, but a lot of the time.
Well, it's like you said earlier, what are you going to gain by, throwing $10 million at someone? If it's a good idea, it's a good idea, and it'll come out and it'll work. Here's something that occurred to me as sort of a closing thought. I don't know that Alphaville has ever been directly remade. I know it's inspired 100 things, but has anyone ever tried to remake it? And do you think someone would? And if so,
officially,
yeah,
No direct remix yet,
okay.
but it could be like a TV show, maybe a Netflix show down the road.
Yeah, I hope not.
Right.
I hope not, because I think, one thing that I've found with a lot of these TV show versions, almost any time a television show does a movie, they explain it to death. They explain it to death, and there is this mentality. It's almost like a sickness that makes entertainment so boring to me, so boring, which is the mentality that says, but what about this? But what about that? Like, well, how did they get to the island? Well, how did he become a detective? Well, how is it that this society arose? We've never heard that story. And it's like, I don't care. I don't care. You don't need to have every single thing explained to you. Like, I don't want to know. I feel like we're moving backwards in storytelling. Like, if you look at television from the 1970s, there are all of these scenes where it's like a detective will say, yeah, there's been a body found at such and such an address. I'm going to go check it out. And then you see them like leave the police station, get in the car, and there's like a minute of them driving. And then they pull up at the crime scene. And I feel like that's where we're going narratively, is to that, like, well, how did he get from point A to point B? And it's like, he probably drove. Like, what do you care? Like, how did so-and-so become a bounty hunter? I don't know. He just did. What is it? Like, and isn't it more interesting to imagine the parts that they don't show you?
Well, and to that point, specifically with the reference to driving, the end of Alphaville shows Lemmy and Natasha leaving Alphaville, or what's left of it, and they're driving, but they're talking about how they're going to the outer, I can't remember what they called it, but the outer galaxies or something like
The
that.
outer,
outer
the
countries.
outer, yeah.
Right. I'm
In their
thinking
car.
like, yeah, I'm thinking, oh, they're on their way to the spaceport or something. But no,
Right.
according to
Yeah.
them, they're actually in their car driving to a different universe. Not
Right.
explained, but you're like, all right, that's cool.
I love
It's a
that. It's
complete
like, to me,
metaphor.
it's like going to the theater. That's why I love to go to the theater. I love to go to the theater, and I can't wait until I can go to the theater again. I love going to the theater. I don't need it to be Broadway. In fact, I don't like Broadway that much because so many Broadway productions, they're trying to make it they want to make you feel like you're watching a movie. And I don't want to watch a movie. If I wanted to watch a movie, I'd go to the movies. I don't need every Broadway show to be like a movie or like an amusement park ride with like giant things coming over my head or something. It's like, can it just be theater? Like the best piece of theater I saw in a really long time was the new version of Oklahoma from a couple of years ago, which was like so low tech that it was practically like on the level of a graduate theater production at a college. And they were using, a projector, like a very primitive, crude projector, and putting people's faces up on a wall. And people were, they had cowboy outfits that looked like they were bought at thrift stores, and there was nothing. Everything was very, very plain, but it was great. It was really, all the imagination was in the performances, the way they staged things, the choices that they made were amazing. And like, that's what I want to see get back to. And that's why I love when I go to the theater. I love that, like, you go to see a production of Shakespeare, and a king will say, and now we will go to France and attack France, and bring glory to England, and hey, and they leave. And it's like 8 guys, and they leave. And then the lights go down, and then the lights come back up, and they're like, boy, the French kicked the shit out of us. How did that happen? And it's like, we didn't need to see. It's actually kind of funnier that, like, Pauline Kael had a wonderful line. She was reviewing the Terry Gilliam film, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, which she didn't like. And I remember I liked it at the time. I don't know if I would still like it if I saw it again. But she was saying she felt like this was a step down for Terry Gilliam as a director. She said, this is the biggest budget he's ever had, and everything is so big and so detailed, and the camera work is so amazing and everything. And to me, it was joyless. And she said, I want him to go back to the days of Monty Python and the Holy Grail, where they couldn't afford horses, so they had the guys with coconuts, like clopping coconuts together, and that was like supposed to represent the fact that they had horses. That's funny. It's
more
much
room for the
funnier.
imagination.
Right.
Yes.
And if you have 65 horses on the screen, the charm is gone.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially because there's no way to keep track of all of them and what they're doing. And yeah, it's just, it's the death of imagination, which is sort of what ALPHAVILLE is about. But yeah,
it is. It's funny. It's funnier to leave things out. It's funny. It's much funnier if it's like, hooray, now we take the fight to our enemies. And it's like 30 seconds later, it's like, there's like 2 guys left. And it's like, well, that was a mistake.
Well, that's why My Dinner with Andre works. I've been watching it as I've been editing my movie. But yeah, they get into the stories and they kind of unfold in your head.
The 1960s European art cinema that I loved so much, that is still a huge, huge source of pleasure for me, is very much performance-based. And I think about scenes like in Ingmar Bergman's Persona, there's a long monologue. I think it's several minutes long, where it's just a close-up of a woman's face as she's telling you a story. And that's something that I wish that more filmmakers would take advantage of. And you don't need to see everything. Sometimes it's much more effective if somebody just tells you a story, and then you get to imagine it. Like the final episode of The Leftovers, which was an HBO show, and it didn't look like they were lacking for money. There were some scenes of incredible scope on that show. But one of the most emotionally powerful scenes was in the very final episode, was a woman telling you a story about something she experienced in another dimension, basically. And the power of that moment comes entirely from just the story that's being told and the performance of that actress, Carrie Coon. And again, you don't need the special. You think you need production values, but a lot of times you don't. A lot of times you don't.
My final thought is hire Godard for the next Star Wars movie. Let's see how that goes.
But I think Godard already made Star Wars, and it was called ALPHAVILLE.
No, he made like the last Star Wars movie, which is horrible. That could be considered a good.
The Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah,
Then
yeah,
what
that
I
could
would
be
love
considered
is
a
if
Godard movie.
just give Godard all of the Rise of Skywalker footage. Just give it to him. Just give it to him. Like, knock yourself out.
That's right. Add titles.
Yeah, he would. There would be like E equals MC square and like pictures of like meat being fed into a grinder. And yeah,
That's
yeah.
right.
I would pay any amount of money to see that, especially
Jean-Luc
under the
Godard
Disney banner.
Star
Yes.
Wars.
That's right.
Godard Wars.
You know, it's Ben Solo walking around, going,
Yeah.
"What's going on?"
Yes, narrated. It would be narrated by like Harvey Keitel or something like that.
Darth Vader's voice, but he never shows up.
Well-
you never see him.
Honestly, now that I think about it, the Alpha 60 voice is not that different from what Kylo Ren sounded like under that mask, that very mechanical, like,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
All right, well, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, guys, for this wonderful edition of the Slowdown and talking about Alphaville and Space Rabbit. So before we go, I just want to give you guys the chance to tell people where they can find you and check out your stuff. So Matt, as the guest, give it a shot.
Well, I'm on Twitter, Matt Zoller Seitz, just with the at in front of it. And RogerEbert.com, you go there and punch in my name and read my film reviews. And Vulture, you just go to Vulture, same thing. My TV reviews are there. And, my video essays are on YouTube and Vimeo.
Awesome.
Awesome. I have a new movie coming out this year, The Secret Society for Slow Romance. They're at slowromancemovie.com. I'm on Twitter, the Sujewa Fantastic. I'm getting my Sujewa names confused. And also on Facebook. Yeah. And plus, we're going to do, I think, several more episodes.
Oh, yeah. And I'll have links to all you guys' stuff down below so people can check it out.
Awesome.
I'm, as always, Ian Simmons of Kicking the Seat, kickseat.com, and here on YouTube and the podcast. If you guys are listening to this later on. So, yes, thanks again. Matt, I feel like maybe extending, if Suji was cool, that an invitation to talk about the Tree of Life in a few months. What would
Yeah,
you think
go
of
for
that?
it.
If I'm available, absolutely. I've got to finish a book. So if I finish the book in time, then yes.
Yeah, well, I think it's in like 4 months, so we'll see.
Okay.
All right,
Great.
the clock is ticking. No. All right.
Okay.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Take care. Have a good night.
Thanks a lot.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Matt.